This is Paul Levy, author of the book Digital Inferno, and I'm just going to talk briefly about open space technology and give a little bit of the background to it for those that are interested. Open space technology is a term that was first expressed through Harrison Owen, and he has a great story about how he discovered it, or how sometimes he says it escaped. We're talking about the 1980s, and I'm not going to go into the history of that. I'm going to go into a slightly wider history around open space, which was really, it seemed like a very timely process for people to meet, to get to work, to have conversations that were self-organised, that were generated by the people in the room who had responded to an invitation, often by an individual or a group or an organisation who wanted to explore something that they were passionate about, that they were interested in, but mostly that they wanted also to somehow get action taken, to get to work on. And traditionally, people would meet, be that in academia, be that in organisations, be that in communities, and things tended to be organised, you might say from the front, from the stage at the front, from the top table. And conferences that Harrison Owen went to, including one he organised himself, tended to be that people would submit proposals for talks, for papers, for articles, for presentations, and people would sit in rows, kind of church-like, kind of in the mode of a meeting, an assembly, where they were there to listen and people were there to talk. And often they found themselves agreeing with each other that some of the most useful conversation actually took place during the breaks. And that was the birth of open space technology, the realisation that the organisation of content is best self-organised. And so open space kind of grew out of that, I would say maybe dissatisfaction or reaction against over-control of the space. Now that over-control has its own history. It goes back to, I mentioned the church, the meeting place, the worship, the top-down hierarchy, where it was the job of people higher up in the hierarchy to decide what the content was and to deliver that lower down. And that advocacy of content, that telling people stuff, pervaded for a very, very long time. And some people would argue maybe it was the freedom of the 60s that finally gave birth to open space. The idea that instead of vertical communication, top down, horizontal communication happens at the level of the peer group, at the level of the community. We sit in a circle and we generate the content. And so some of the features of open space, which is an empty agenda at the start, a marketplace where people offer sessions that they are passionate about, that they're interested in, and then people use their 2 feet to go to those freely and to leave them maybe halfway through as well and go to other sessions. And some of the descriptors of open space that describe what tends to happen, that whenever it starts is the right time, whatever happens is the only thing that could have happened, that whoever comes are the right people. When it's over, it's over. Wherever it happens is the right place. And I mentioned the law of 2 feet, which isn't really a law, it's the description of what happens in open space, and the horizontal where people aren't controlling you, and the principle is freedom and self-organisation, is people tend to take their feet, people tend to move, make themselves mobile, and head towards wherever they feel they're going to get most value. And other things around open space, the idea that you can just float around and almost pollinate different spaces. And also you can just sit and look beautiful like a flower, and some informal sessions will just pop up in the bar and some of the relaxing places. The open space has a certain spontaneity to it. And the background to that, therefore, is that if you feel that you want to explore something and you would like to change something in your community, or you feel your community is restless about something, all you need to do is issue an invite and have a space, and people will come if that invite is something they freely share with you in terms of passion about that topic. So people are invited, people come, they sit in a circle. Often on the wall is an agenda with some breakout spaces and some times, and sometimes there may be some check-in at some point, and at the end a closing circle where people will also share what they've learned. That those simple structures are minimal. They aim for the minimum possible structure for the maximum amount of self-organisation. People create their own conversations. Now that is definitely historically recent and a reaction against the top-down control, the hierarchy. It was only 50 years ago that most organisations, and many still are, have control structures in place that are quite complex. And when conversations happen, they're very tightly facilitated, chaired, controlled, and content is delivered from the front. Here, content is created by the community. It's less predictable, but often when we look back, we see how much work we actually got done, because the latent energy in the group always comes out through self-organisation. As Harrison Owen says, it always works. And I've yet to hear of an open space that didn't work, because even if no one shows up, this might sound a bit cheesy, but it works too, because whoever came were the right people. Does it involve surrendering to this? I'd suggest not. What it involves is freely giving yourself towards what often people realise after was always natural in them. That we create well when we self-organise. That when one person organises everybody else in a complex changing environment, that's not the most efficient way and effective way for people to get work done anyway. An open space now is used to get work done, not just to have conversations. It began often with come and meet and let's talk about something, and then out of an open space might come agreement to do work. But some open space now actually is the meeting place, a bit like the flash mob, to come and actually get something done, to make our park safer, to make our village safer. And that's been happening all over the world, thousands and thousands of times. Now, if that sounds to you a bit hippie, a bit unclear, well, it can be unclear at the start because you don't know what the content is going to be. You don't know what the agenda is going to be. And there is an act of belief, but it doesn't have to be a big leap of faith, because we've so many examples of it, right from observing how children work, looking into nature about how self-organisation can be so efficient, so effective, so beautiful, and so much can be done in even a short space of time. The faith is simply in the human condition, our potential, our ability when we get together and self-organise that we get work done. Now, what we've currently got is an overlap of history. We've still got a lot of assumptions in the way that we are governed, in the way that organisations are still structured, that top-down is the best and that people at the top, they call the shots and they get paid most. But a lot of, I'd say the newer generations, but that isn't only age-based, because people are getting this now from all ages and all parts of the world and all kinds of diversity, that the horizontal, the circle that's kind of at our level is the most effective way for us to be, because we always were naturally able to collaborate, to sit around the fire, to tell stories. And hierarchy actually was only ever really one model, often based on our spiritual religious beliefs that higher up was more evolved, that higher up was more perfect. And you don't have to lose that belief to understand that where we are now, whether you have religious, spiritual beliefs or not, there is enough evidence that when we meet and we open space together in a circle and we create our own agenda, by the end of the day, wow, so much gets done. And that's the background to open space technology.